Welcome, visitors. Hi, Geoff.
Good morning, good
What are you-
afternoon, wherever you are.
well, I'm in the same place I always am, Geoff. Um,
What time zone?
um, well, today's show, we're going to take off with an esteemed guest, but before we introduce her, we're just going to highlight what we're going to talk about later in Strategy Suite. It'll be just Geoff and I this week. I have to settle for the two of us, and we'll be looking at the latest poll, the shrinking Conservative caucus, the NDP's vision for transmission, the city of Richmond, and it's helping Canada Post by mailing letters to people in a certain area of Richmond these days. OB-GYNs are resigning in Kamloops, and the BCGEU strike continues on, and we'll cover that too. We're also may have a special cameo from a old friend later on in Strategy Suite. But our guest today for our feature interview is President and CEO of YVR, that is Vancouver International Airport, Tamara Vrooman. Let's go rapid fire on Tamara's leadership roles. There's a lot of them. In addition to being CEO of YVR, she's the current Chancellor of Simon Fraser University. She is the current co-chair of the Premier's Trade and Economic Security Task Force. She is the past CEO for 13 years at Van City Credit Union and a past chair of the Canada Infrastructure Bank and a past Deputy Minister of Finance back when they balanced budgets in British Columbia. And she's an Order BC member. She's a Canadian Business Leader of the Year. And most importantly, in the eyes of many of our listeners, she's from Kamloops. Tamara, welcome to Hotel Pacifico.
Oh, thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Did I miss anything? Did we get everything covered there?
Eldest of four, only that kind of stuff.
All that kind of stuff. Brave bragging rights. Well, how long have you been at YVR now?
I've been at YVR 5 years.
Wow,
Started,
okay.
started on July 1st, 2020, with what I thought was the middle of the pandemic, but turned out to be the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
So it's been 5 years here, yeah.
Okay, and I mean, paint a picture for us of what's happening at YVR today in terms of its role in the economy. I mean, it really is a juggernaut, but I think a lot of people often think of it mainly as passengers going through the airport, but it's a bit more, it's a lot more than that, right? In terms of the role it's playing in the supply chain and the economy at large.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very privileged to serve many communities in British Columbia, and of course, about 26 million people come through our airport each and every day. And because we all use the airport, we think of it in the way that we use it, which is a passenger air transportation hub, which it absolutely is. But our cargo business is also very significant. So we have two roles, right? Travel and trade. And over the last couple of years, last year in particular, saw a significant uptick in our cargo growth. So we're the fastest growing airport, cargo port on the west coast of North America. This year has seen those volumes continue to increase despite some of the trade disruptions that we have seen. And I'm pretty confident we'll have a record year for cargo. So what does that mean? Contributes about 20 billion to the GDP, of which the majority of that flows to British Columbia. So we're a major part of the trade network in our region. Employ about 26,000 people. So we're a major employer across all sorts of disciplines, and are, of course, the gateway, whether you're shipping goods or traveling to most parts of the world.
Some of the most important investments that I've seen YVR be involved in recently, though, are making sure more people and goods can get there. There's, of course, the investment in the Canada Line, and you're adding a new parking garage. Do you ever wonder if there's a better way to organize planning across the region so that YVR can continue to be plugged in down the road, or is that still going to be something that YVR has to kind of take care of itself?
Yeah, I'd say there's two things to that, Geoff. The first is depending on how you think of it, YVR is either at the beginning of the road or the end of the road. So we definitely, and we have the real advantage of being in a major urban area. Most airports, think about Toronto Pearson, is outside of the Toronto city area in Mississauga. So that is a huge advantage, but it's also a huge constraint when it comes to moving people through neighborhoods, business districts, school zones, and to get to the airport. So we are definitely thinking about decisions that we can make on our own that can change the way that people and goods move to and from our significant second largest airport in the country, transportation hub. So one of the things we're looking at is whether or not we can have the first air to marine cargo facility where, because we're on an island in the river, could
Right.
could we move cargo directly from aircraft onto, say, electric battery powered river barges? They're used all over Asia and Europe. Silently go up and down the Fraser, not disturbing residents or sturgeon or salmon, to points east in the Fraser Valley. What's east in the Fraser Valley? The railhead trucking nodes, and then we cut out the whole transportation and gridlock through the lower mainland and Highway 1 and Highway 99 to points east. But the other thing that we're doing, in addition to that, is I chair the Greater Vancouver Gateway Council. And so that is a group that's been meeting and has existed since the 90s, since we were first talking about the Asia Pacific Gateway, how to get the CEO of the port, container terminal operators, shippers, railway companies, trucking association, airports, and transit to really come together to say, okay, what's in the best interest of the gateway? That's what's in the best interest of YVR, what's not in the best interest of the rail companies, what's in the best interest of the gateway. And that's how previously investments like the South Fraser Perimeter Road and others rose to the top because they benefit the whole gateway. I'm a big believer that we need more of that. We need to share more data so we can use the assets that we already have and make them more productive and work better across all modes in order to get the throughput that we need through the gateway. So for sure, there's stuff we can do, but there's also things more that we can do together.
I mean, the term gateway was a bit of a rallying cry for investment going 20 years ago, maybe. Gordon Campbell was in his first and second terms as premier. And there were a lot of projects that kind of fed into that umbrella, such as Portman Highway 1 and ultimately Canada Line and expansions like that. But I don't hear like the term gateway as much anymore. Like I don't feel like it's advanced as an identity for Vancouver as it used to be, or the Pacific Gateway, because I mean that can include Prince Rupert too. But what do you think about that? Like, does Gateway need to be, reintroduced to the broader public conversation about what the benefits it brings?
I think that's a fair observation, Mike, that it has been something that's hasn't been talked about as much lately. And that's frankly, I think we've been a victim of our own success. Those investments that you talked about really did endure and did allow the gateway to expand. And then certainly the expansion that we've seen at the Port of Prince Rupert have added to that. But now we're in a position where that's inadequate and needs to be connected better. And so one of the things that we're really looking at as a Gateway Council is how digitization and the sharing of data can improve the throughput of the assets and the investments that we've already made. So what we know is that resilience is vital to trade hubs just because of the disruption that's going on almost on a daily basis in terms of trade and movement of goods throughout the world. And so if you're only reliant on one form and can't coordinate the movement of goods and resources through the infrastructure that you have, you're probably going to have inefficient infrastructure. So I think the idea of a gateway now is for sure is about the opportunity for trade out into the Asia Pacific in our case, but it's not only about hard assets and infrastructure, it's now also about digitized infrastructure systems and regulation that allow more throughput and more connectivity to make sure that the investments that we are making are resilient, flexible, and enable us to get maximum movement for the dollar invested.
Yes. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about TELUS's new AI factory in Rimouski, Quebec. And we've been throwing around some buzzwords. Nothing as bad as circle back or synergy, but still, you might be wondering, what exactly is an AI factory? What's a data center? How are they different? Here's the simplest way to think about it. It's like the difference between renting an apartment and owning your house. Traditional data centers essentially rent you the infrastructure, like servers and storage. You have conditional access under someone else's terms. An AI factory, on the other hand, is all of that and more. It gives you complete control. AI factories are complete ecosystems, allowing Canadian businesses to build new AI models from scratch or customize existing ones for their specific needs, all centralized with a full set of AI tools. And this brings us back to the importance of sovereignty. TELUS doesn't just rent space in someone else's data center. They own the servers, operate the infrastructure, and control the network through their own pure fiber system, ensuring everything is managed under Canadian jurisdiction. This is TELUS's approach. Sovereignty by design, engineered in every layer of the Rimouski factory from the ground up. Next week, we'll be demystifying more AI terms and dive deeper into what this means for Canadian innovation.
You've talked a lot throughout your career, but in this job too, about reconciliation, which is a controversial topic, even more so today maybe than it was a few years ago. What has it got to do with air traffic? How does it fit into YVR's role?
Yeah, so we here are located on Sea Island, which I think most people know. Historically, the home of 5 Musqueam villages around, because, as I said earlier, we're on the river delta, perfect for trade in Indigenous culture as much as it is in our own. And so several years ago, we entered into a friendship and sustainability agreement with Musqueam, recognizing that we were located on Musqueam traditional territory, that there were some work that we could do to culturally integrate and welcome people from around the world to this place, recognizing the Indigenous stewards of this place, but frankly, that there was more we could do around economic reconciliation. And so we have been working in very close partnership. And I tell any business leaders who ask me, like, how's that going and why would you do that? That it has been one of the best decisions that we have made. We have certainty of our land base. There's no question about the ability to invest. We are aligned with Musqueam in terms of how we do that and how the benefits of that are shared. We have every single person who comes on to Sea Island as a contractor or is going to help us dig a trench to replace airfield lighting or whatever, receives cultural training so that we have all eyes open for artifacts and important restorative practices that are key. Those don't slow us down. Those allow everybody to be working in the same way, do the right thing when we do come across cultural belongings or artifacts that keep our operations going, and also meet our commitments to Musqueam. And then we just have the language, the fact that when refugees come here, as unfortunately they do sometimes from Afghanistan or Ukraine, we have elders who volunteer in the middle of the night to come out and welcome those refugees in a way that's quite unique and quite moving to people. You can imagine being displaced and being welcomed by the original peoples here. So it's been a fantastic partnership. We're always looking for ways to deepen it and to grow it. It's a key part of our resiliency and our certainty and our economic success.
Now, in terms of the traffic through YVR for people, it's obviously been a bit of a geopolitical change in the last year with the U.S. and some changing patterns. At the same time, I'm sure you're continuing to expand routes to Asia and other places in the world. How's the balance changed in the last year? Have patterns actually changed as much as we hear anecdotally about people not going? I mean, I have friends who say, I'm not going to the U.S., but then I have friends who are. But what are you seeing in terms of the data?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt since the beginning of this year that travel by Canadians to the US via routes from YVR are down, depending on how you measure it, anywhere from 11 to 25%. So that's significant, actually. Travel by,
Are Americans still coming here though?
yeah, just about to say that. Travel by
Okay.
Americans coming into Canada is unchanged or, in fact, up a little bit. You know, we just
Hmm.
got stats out of the cruise ship season here that just wound up in Vancouver. And while it was down a little bit from last year, it's still very robust. So yes, Americans still coming to our region. But what's been interesting is I always say that travel and trade are like water. You know, they find their way through, and that's what we've seen here. So domestic travel has been up year over year, and international travel has been on fire. So despite all of the disruptions that we're seeing as a result of the changes in posture in the United States, I think are well on track to have a record year. And by record, I mean, you know, record in the last 100 years record passenger volumes here through YVR.
What routes stand out as kind of higher growth routes that have really emerged in the last few years?
Certainly, prior to the pandemic, YVR had 55 flights a week, direct service to China. That was more than any other airport in North America, which is crazy when you think about it. I mean, more than LAX or San Francisco, much bigger hubs than we are. But we had a very well tried and true model of certainty and connectivity for Chinese traffic through YVR to the rest of North America. When the pandemic hit, that all but ceased. And so it forced us, frankly, to diversify in ways that we probably should have been before that. And so routes to Seoul, to Tokyo, to Taiwan, to Singapore, to Bangkok, those have been very good routes for us as more and more people are diversifying in terms of not only trade and travel, but using those as launch places into the rest of Asia. We also had a new route for the first time, Vancouver to Dubai, which takes us, part of the problem is we've had, because of the war in Ukraine, the Russian airspace has been closed, and that's normally the way that we would get to the subcontinent, to India. And so now we're flying the other direction. That's also opened up some very good routes, Turkey, into parts of the Middle East, and those have been good growth opportunities for us as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I would say in both of those cases, the other thing that's really interesting to the first topic is those aren't just passenger routes. The reason why those work so well is they're massive cargo routes. So sometimes friends and family will say to me, you know, I traveled to Seoul, and like the plane was full, but it wasn't full. I said, trust me, it was full. It's just in full in the place that you can't see it, which is the load that is beneath the seats. So those routes have been vital to opening up trade to those regions, and we are continuing to participate in trade missions and partner because they're a key part of connectivity and diversifying trade to those.
Well, in terms of cargo, I imagine like a place like Seoul or China that a lot of consumer goods are coming in
Yep.
to the country. But what's going out?
Yeah, so for sure, our high value agricultural and seafood flies via air
Right.
to Asia. There's a bit of a dampening on that to China because of the tariff that's been placed on fresh seafood, but really the other Asian markets are diversifying, and we're seeing fresh seafood shipped to those markets. People are like, well, that's just like a few fish and a few. No, these are massive high value shipment worth tens of millions of dollars in each and every week going through YVR. So that's one. We also see a lot of the back and forth between some of the textiles and component pieces going back and forth between on clothing and high value textile manufacturer, given that we have some of the highest and best companies in Lululemon or Arc'teryx or Aritzia here. So that's another one. Electronics. and pharmaceuticals also move via air. And then the one that most people don't think about, the thing that ships via air, particularly on the outbound in this particular case, is gold. Gold travels by air. And if you have a gold mine, you need to have access to an air route in order to get that gold shipped to market. So it's a very diverse travel and transportation mode. And we see a lot of the world's biggest shipping company, like Maersk in Scandinavia, buying up air freighters as fast as they can in order to get that resilient, multimodal shipping platform that the world's situation and economy demands.
It's very encouraging to hear that kind of a report, but should we take heart from your experience that the Canadian economy will be able to pivot, obviously more slowly, in response to these trade pressures, or do you think it'll be tougher in the larger economy to make the swings?
I think that some of the challenges that we have, of course, are that the majority of our national wealth is still coming from resource extraction and transportation. And so that, whether it's canola, whether it's copper, whether it's fossil fuels or LNG, making sure that we have the infrastructure and the system to make sure that those are the highest value trade routes. I'm not sure where we need to be there. So that, I think rightly so, we see a lot of focus on diversification for trade and the infrastructure needed to move those resources. I personally would like us to be making the long discussed but little executed investments in creating the ability to have higher value created here. So through refineries, through sustainable aviation fuel, through production in the forestry sector and elsewhere. I'd like to see some of those investments, and certainly we have the technology and the human capital to really make sure that those investments are made, for the markets of 2030, not the markets for 2000, if we put our minds to it. So part of it is working well, but there's still a big piece around, how are we getting the highest and best value for the resources that we have, including creating higher value production here.
You paint a pretty positive picture in terms of YVR's role in the economy, but sometimes stuff happens, whether it's COVID or terrible weather or strikes.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people, when they see YVR in the news, it's because something's happened or NAV Canada doesn't show up for work one day. How are you managing through disruption? Like as a leader, I imagine you wake up one morning and your whole plan for the day has gone upside down because of some external event. It seems like it happens a lot because you can't control these external events. So how do you prepare the airport for that?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those roles where, as we say, if a disruption is going to happen, it happens on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend. Inevitably, it's just the way. It's just the way it works. So we have had our challenges. Certainly, I've been quite, I think, transparent about the disruption that we had in around the holiday season in 2022. It was not our finest hour. We call that the 4 days in December here as a code. But we use that as an opportunity to get better, because whether it's weather events, whether it's sudden change in border procedures, which we haven't talked a lot about the border, but the border is obviously a big deal for us. And actually, there's some real assets to the way it's structured at the moment in the current environment, or whether it's labor disruption or Hamas or an affiliate taking over flight information displays and cyber attacks. Like, there's virtually no part of our business that isn't potentially susceptible. So we spend a lot of time testing, retesting, testing resilience, practicing. We also are using technology in a way that we haven't before, and is frankly world leading in terms of our ability to monitor, to predict, to coordinate, and to communicate. The digital twin that we invested and created here in 2021 now is being sought after, and we're selling that technology and partnerships to airports around the world. So that's a nice little export of our resilience. But we practice every day. We share information and we build redundancy such that when things do happen, because we can't prevent them from happening, our ability to respond safely, of course, that's at the core of everything we do, and effectively is what's led us to, be named the best airport in North America year after year.
When it comes to shipping, the word bunkering might sound like something out of a war movie. In reality, it simply means fueling a ship. And for more than a century, that fuel has been heavy oil or diesel. But there's a better option. LNG, liquefied natural gas, is natural gas cooled until it becomes a liquid. In this form, it's compact enough to fuel large ships. Earlier this year, BC made history. The Silver Nova, a state-of-the-art cruise ship, became the first vessel bunkered with LNG in Vancouver, supplied by FortisBC's Tilbury facility in Delta. FortisBC isn't new to this. Riding on a ferry between Tsawwassen and Victoria, good chance that ferry is running on LNG provided by FortisBC. There are 10 marine vessels that are fueled with LNG, 6 for BC Ferries and 4 with Seaspan. It's part of a growing global shift to lower emission shipping. They've safely completed more than 78,000 LNG bunkering operations for customers here in BC. These examples show what's possible right here in Vancouver. But here's the challenge. Unless Canada builds the infrastructure, we risk falling behind ports in the US or Asia that are already fueling LNG-powered vessels. Without infrastructure to support these larger vessels, Canada could miss out on the economic and environmental benefits of becoming a global LNG fueling hub. The Tilbury facility has an advantage. It produces some of the lowest carbon intensity LNG in the world, thanks to hydroelectricity produced in BC. Expanding that capacity would not only support shipping here at home, but it would also put Canada on the map as a leader in the international transition to lower carbon marine fuels. Because shipping isn't just about moving people and goods, it's about moving them responsibly. And the opportunity is at our doorstep. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
You're the Chancellor of Simon Fraser, so you've spoken out about the role of post-secondary education in the development of our economy as well. What's your concern there? You signaled in a recent speech that you think a lot more needs to be done. Is it just a money question, or is it a policy problem as well that you're looking for help on?
There's two things there. The first is, I think the model, a little bit like the model that YVR got used to, right, with those 55 weekly flights direct from China, and therefore we didn't have to think and diversify quite as we might have. The same is true for post-secondary in Canada. There are tuition freezes in virtually every jurisdiction. Increased labor costs in every jurisdiction, and so the way and requirements for balanced budgets for post-secondary institutions, and a constraint largely in domestic research grants, so reliance on U.S. research grants. So you put all that together, and that was working well when it was working well, but now virtually every one of those factors has changed. And so particularly with the fact that international students have declined, which is where the extraordinary tuition could be obtained, and the fact that research grants have been unilaterally severed in many fields in the US. I think one of the great things that has made our country as productive and well known as it is our publicly funded public universities. Why would taxpayers invest in a post-secondary system? Because they believe it's going to make the country and the economy better. And so if we're not seeing it as part of the infrastructure for diversifying our economy and making sure it's resilient and has the tools that are fit for task going forward, I really see a problem for us as a country going forward, particularly if we continue constrain immigration. So where is the future air traffic controller that uses 100% digitized equipment going to come from, if not from our universities? Where's the next innovation for mRNA type vaccines that were so key in COVID going to come from, if not for our universities? We're leaders in quantum computing, but we're going to fall behind unless we can funnel the right investment. So it was really, Geoff, just a call to say, don't forget that this is infrastructure. And it's infrastructure that needs to be invested and supported and seen as part of the way that we build the future of our economy and our country, in the same way we would consider constructing a port or constructing a new.
Well, the pressures facing advanced education and facing other sectors are, obviously influenced by where government finances are at right now. And it's not just BC, it's Canada-wide in terms of rising deficits, and definitely coming out of COVID in a less sustainable footing, I would argue, in terms of public finances. You spoke at the UBCM recently, I think, broadly on sustainability of government finances. What's your prescription?
Yeah, it's a tough spot that the province of BC finds itself in fiscally, and many jurisdictions across the country. And while I commend the government's work to try and reduce spending, no jurisdiction or no government I've ever seen or been part of has been able to shrink its way to success. So that's a necessary part. But again, the real problem that the province has and that the economy has is, for sure, spending needs to be monitored. But it's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is just an absolute absence of revenue growth. And so that revenue and an over-reliance on parts of the revenue equation that I think should have maybe caused us to look squinty-eyed at it, like property purchase transfer tax revenue, for example. When that starts to be as big or bigger than income tax revenue, that's not a good sign. So we need to make sure, first and foremost, that our province is a place that can attract direct investment, because it's only through investment are we going to get more productive, are we going to grow, are we going to create jobs, and. In order for that investment to be attracted here, we have to give it certainty. So we do need to improve our regulatory environment so that that investment can get to where we say it needs to be with some certainty. It would be good if we took a look at our tax system to make sure that the tax system is focusing on the things that we want to see in the economy: diversification, productivity investments, innovation. And if you do all of those things, you should grow the revenue base while keeping an eye on expenses. You can return to balance. But none of that happens overnight. When I was a Deputy Minister of Finance, the last time we had a deficit and had to work our way back to an improved credit rating, you had to have a plan that did that. And then every quarter had to report on how we're doing.
So you're making real progress on it.
So you're making progress. And I find sometimes, candidly, that public the public sector, both the elected and bureaucratic, seems to think if we publish a plan, we're good. No, it's insufficient. So you have to have the discipline to measure and execute and report on. That's the only thing that's going to give confidence back to the market and to the rating agencies that are so key to keeping our cost of financing low. I mean, you know how it is, right? Just like with most things, financial reputations take a second to lose and years to build back. We're in the build back phase now, but we have an opportunity to demonstrate that this is a jurisdiction worth investing in. This is a place where people should build their careers and their families and their communities. But it really does start with that plan that focuses on those things and builds year over year.
Now, I mean, it may be just on that point. It's maybe I'm making it too simplistic, but generally you would want the rate of growth to exceed the rate of spending, or
Generally, that's what
obviously to to
yeah.
to make the curve go
Yeah.
the right way.
It works the same way in the province as it does on your household balance sheet. Yeah.
So you imagine that.
Yeah.
But you were chair of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and one of the things you were trying to do there was to get those investments that would stimulate growth. Is that model, we have a new prime minister now, and the work continues for the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Is that model, do you think will bear fruit in terms of stimulating investment that can help spur growth?
Yeah, the Canada Infrastructure Bank, like most new things, took a little while to find its feet. It's no different than any other new agency or a startup. And so I was asked to chair the bank after the bank had been in existence for about 3.5 years, but most of its effort had been focused on getting that foundation going. And as a result, it had only really been able to make one investment. So the role of me and the board and our new CEO was to really demonstrate that there was a need for infrastructure financing across the national geography and in multiple sectors. So we went in 3 years from one single investment to over 37 in every sector of our economy, from sustainable agriculture to telecommunications connectivity to rare minerals to transit to energy infrastructure and ports and so on. But the challenge, I think, there is how to ensure that you have the private sector also participating. So where were we able to attract non-federal funds? We were able to do that as well, such that we were able to lever that, on a rate of 2 or 3, not the 5 or 6 that people talk about. That doesn't actually exist, 2 or 3 to 1. So I do think it's a model that, if imitation is the greatest form of flattery, certainly when I was there, both the United States, the United Kingdom, and as well as Australia came to study the infrastructure bank because they wanted to start one themselves and did in all of those jurisdictions. So I do think it is a necessary tool in the toolkit, but it's only one. You have to make sure that those other parts of the economy and the investment system are working efficiently so that the public funds are doing what they're most suited to do, which is providing that patient capital that de-risks a lot of these initiatives so that the private capital can accelerate on top.
Well, we see a big national debate emerging now about fossil fuels and whether there should be another pipeline and where that pipeline should be. Do you think we have the tools at the political and governance level to have those conversations so we start to see what the options are and the public has confidence in them?
I think what's beneath your question there, Geoff, is I really hope that we spend a little bit more time talking about why we would actually do that, what the benefits are, what the alternatives are, and what it actually means. I find too often in those debates, it's the for, against, and no conversation, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the community and the country is left sort of saying, well, I don't know, I just sort of pick this or this. The other problem is it doesn't send the right signal to the investment community globally either, because it looks like what should be thoughtful investment decisions on where we want the economy to grow and what infrastructure is needed have become highly partisan. And I don't know any investor that invests with confidence into a partisan environment. So it's self-defeating. That we need to have more thoughtful discussion and literacy built about why we would do this and what the benefits are. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Tamara, you've given us a great tour of the airport today and through a number of other important public policy issues. I learned a lot, Geoff. Did you learn anything today, Geoff?
No, I know there was turbulence out there, but I feel better about getting through it.
Well
I
said.
know the airport jokes are rampant, so that's actually.
Sorry about that.
Well, thanks for stopping by, Tamara, and we hope to have you back again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks very much for your interest. A pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Why are BC public sector workers on strike? It's simple. We can't afford to stay in our jobs without fair wages. I'm a wildfire fighter. I risk my life to keep others safe, but I make just $28 an hour. Half of us are thinking about leaving already, and now government wants us to accept wages below inflation. I can't afford to fall behind.
Tell government to come back to the table with a fair deal before we lose the people who keep BC running. Visit frontlinesfirst.ca. A message from the BC General Employees Union.
Just Geoff and me in Strategy Suite this week, but we have a lot to go through. So Geoff, you and I should both talk at 1.5 speed.
Okay, I'll go as fast as I can, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Geoff. Last few days, there was a new poll in BC politics out from Abacus, which is the NDP feeling rather chuffed with themselves, I think.
I will say so.
47% NDP, 40% BC Conservative, 8% Greens, 3% Centre BC, 1% 1 BC. There
Yeah.
you go. They're on message. They're at 1% for 1 BC.
Well, it's been a great week for the EB team because they have a substantive piece of legislation in the House, which is to accelerate the development of
Hey, you're
electrical
getting
delivery.
ahead of the agenda here, Geoff.
Okay, but we can come back to it because it's so
We
important.
will. We will. Don't worry. Don't worry.
All
I'm
right.
going to set
Okay,
you
well,
up for have
what
some good
did
stuff.
you think of the poll?
Well, I just wanted to pick apart the poll for a minute because that's
Yeah,
what
let's
I
do
do.
that. Okay.
Okay, so 47%, obviously that's a pretty good number. I will note that among the 60 plus voters, who we all know are the most likely voters because old people have nothing else to do but vote, they're at 53% with 60 plus. However, among that age group, they're only at 34% approval rating, whereas their approval rating is 40% across the board. So you get this weird phenomena where the older people are more likely to vote NDP and less likely to approve of their performance.
Mhm.
And what I take away from that is if something better comes along, watch out. But right now, I think the older people are not turned on by the BC Conservatives, and so, they're parking with the NDP.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree with that.
and that's Abacus did not publish the regional numbers for the interior, so I'm not able to identify whether they had the Conservatives too low in the interior or maybe there's something going on in the interior. But anyways, the bottom line is it's not 1998 when the NDP government of the day was at subterranean in their polling numbers.
16, 17, yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty good for a government that's, what are we in now? 8 years in?
Yeah, third or fourth, yeah.
My God,
Several
8 years
mandates,
in.
8 years in, that's right.
How on earth is British Columbia still operating? 8 years in NDP government.
No, it's unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's got to be encouraging for the EB team, which has not had a wonderful year in a lot of respects, but now sees the opposition disintegrating. So,
Well, I think it shows, Geoff, John Rustad's commitment to fiscal responsibility by shrinking the size of the BC Conservative budget at the legislature. So I think it's a lead by example type of approach there where, let's not spend so much taxpayer money on MLA budgets. Let's just reduce the size of the caucus.
well, I have no inside information about the problems inside the Conservative caucus, but what you can see from the outside is just mind-numbing. And it's not clear, even among their staff, how many of them are long-serving Conservatives. I mean, we had the strange episode last week of Brad Zubik, who's been a New Democrat and a federal Liberal and is now a provincial Conservative, telling Wolfgang Deppner of Canadian Press that he was basically done in that town because he asked John Rustad if he was paranoid. That was a strange outburst. But old associate of mine, Jonathan Ross, popped up in the Twitter stream as another possible member of the Conservative staff team. He also is a big federal Liberal, worked with Suk Dhaliwal for a long time.
Jonathan Ross, is going to the BC Conservatives?
Well, there was such a rumor on Twitter, on X.
Oh, okay.
And so it seems like most of the really solid Conservatives who were in that first revival under Rustad. So Angela Isidoro, who's I think now executive director of the party. The president of the party is Isha Esti. Of course, Aaron Gunn is in Ottawa now as a member of Parliament. They seem to control the party. And Angela Isidoro famously said, I think it was on Mo Amir's show, that polarization is the way to go. And he's certainly losing, the party's performance is certainly clearing out one side of the equation. I don't know which side Isidoro would like, but I suppose they can see this as a purification process leading towards better success down the road. I'm not sure. It looks like chaos to voters.
I mean, we kind of skipped over what the news was, which was Amelia Boltby from Penticton left caucus, had her reasons. She had changed her profile photo a couple weeks ago to a photo of her and Eleanor Sturko, so I guess that was foretold through her social media accounts. I would just say this, look, I don't know if John Rustad's going to be leading the BC Conservatives in the next election. He may not, but I would say there's a lot of time between now and the next election, if it's on a fixed date, that anything could happen. And we only need to look at last election cycle as to hold on to your hats, BC. Things can happen very quickly and very decisively in a short time. So I'm not putting a ton of stock in these poll numbers. I'm not putting a ton of stock into Conservative disarray right now. They have time to put it together, or they can choose to let it unravel and have some other reorganization happen. So to be continued.
What happened to Kevin Falcon is still an instructive lesson here, because he wound up at something like 9% in the polls and then found himself defenestrated basically by people who we've never been sure who they were, but took responsibility for the problems on the non-NDP side of the room, and basically established Rustad as the candidate. Now Rustad is in serious difficulties, and the way that Boltby left, followed by his claims that she was somehow pro-Hamas or perhaps suffering from emotional or mental issues, just reflected even more badly on Rustad than some of the problems he's had up until now. So for those who were concerned about making sure there was a credible alternative to the NDP, there's a bigger mess to clean up now than I would say they had at the point of Kevin Falcon leaving. I wonder what Kevin Falcon's thoughts are these days. They'd be
Geoff, I appreciate your empathy for those looking for an alternative to the NDP, and I will pass along your kind words to those people. And
name names. Here's something we don't think about often enough. Food is power. And in too many countries, food has become a bargaining chip. Prices rise and fall depending on decisions made in Washington or Beijing, thousands of kilometers away from daily life here in BC. When foreign governments shift trade rules, or when global markets swing out of control, families are left paying the price. But Canada chose a different path. With supply management, we can make sure milk, cheese, and yogurt are made here at home with milk produced by Canadian farmers. That's food sovereignty, knowing we aren't dependent on foreign governments for our most essential foods. It's a quiet kind of independence that shields us from the chaos of international politics and trade disputes, and it matters. Because when markets swing, when borders tighten, when supply chains buckle under pressure, Canadian families are protected. In a world where so much feels unpredictable, this is one policy choice that puts stability first, protecting consumers and keeping our food secure. Supply management delivers for BC families. A message from BC Dairy.
So you're all hot to trot to talk about the NDP's government's announcement this week from our former guest, Minister Dix, talking about the North Coast transmission line, and there were some other little morsels in that energy package about how they're going to allocate our rational electricity in the future.
Well, I think any of us who have watched the energy scene in BC have seen that even before Site C, there was not enough to go around. And as I understood the situation before this legislation came in, the BC Hydro planners kept a waiting list of people who thought they might or might not go ahead with a large project. And they were in sort of a seniority list. If you and I had come in with a proposal for a pulp mill, which we hoped to do 10 years ago, still hadn't done, we might still be on that list with a possible allocation of power. What this bill does is take all of the would-be and pretender projects out of the mix and prioritize them to align with the province's goal to build those critical minerals, and they're stranded outside the grid in the far northwest of the province for the most part. So there's a multi-billion-dollar project which does two things. It connects to those properties. Red Chris Mine is already in operation in one respect, but it's going to keep expanding. So these are not flash in the pan or 10-year from now projects. These are real things that will happen and more likely to happen with the power. But it means that other things won't happen, like huge server farms for artificial intelligence, for example, because there isn't enough power for that.
Well, some are, I mean, they have some level, I think they've got like 400 megawatts for data centers and AI, but that's not much, frankly. These data centers are huge. Um,
Well, they don't produce any jobs.
well, but still, isn't there a different issue there with kind of data sovereignty though? Like, do we want all of our AI data centers all in the States? Like, I mean, just as a Canadian, like, don't we want to have our own infrastructure up here?
Well, sure, I think so. But I think that there are other ways possibly to get at it, and we should have a data sovereignty discussion. These mines are going to need power if we want to get those critical minerals out of there, and that's been the case for a long time.
And electricity for electrification of LNG is a big one.
That's right.
But on the one hand, okay, so as you've made the point that there's not enough electricity to go around, so there's laudable goals to obviously support mining and lower emission LNG, which is good for the world in terms of energy transition. Canada's LNG will be lower emission than anybody's, but then at the same time, we're also pushing hard on electrification of EVs and home heating and other things. And I question whether we can do it all responsibly. The other thing with electricity, which I don't think that there's been a full public reckoning on, is that as we add more and more and more electricity into the system, which we ought to do, but wind, solar, Site C, but other projects in the future, the percentage of the legacy power we have from WAC Bennett Dam and Revelstoke and some of those old dams goes lower and lower, and that's cheap power, and that cheap power's not going to be driving the rate as much as it used to. So the rates are going to get pushed up beyond inflation if the natural course of business carries on, unless government goes in and subsidizes it or something. So I just think it's going to be tough to maintain affordability in electricity in the future with, we're going to be like other jurisdictions pretty soon. We're not going to have this huge advantage of these dams we built 60 years ago and that are paid for. We're going to be, our rate's going to have to reflect the cost of capital. And so that's maybe not a political challenge in the next year, but down the road, governments are going to be facing.
Well, since the Horgan administration, the NDP has been struggling to reshape the energy supply to include a lot of renewables that are at a lower rate than we had under the independent power processes that were started by Gordon Campbell. So that's all been restructured. And I think the good news for the EB team this week is that Adrian Dix has got his second major piece in play now. The first piece was basically outright approval of a number of proposed renewable projects, which we're told produce cheaper power, but they're of not much use unless they have the dispatchable power, the reliable day-by-day power you get from a hydro project. So the two combinations are coming together. And I think it gives EB something very tangible to talk about when he's making his economic pitch to the province, which he hasn't really had up until now. So I think that's good news. And the government struggled in the spring with a couple of pieces of legislation that caused more anxiety than positive feelings in terms of speeding up stuff. So it's good.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to Cowichan decision, and I'll update on that one. A letter was sent out this week from Mayor Brodie to property owners in the area that's covered by the Cowichan ruling.
Richmond, Mayor Brodie, yeah.
In Richmond, yeah, Mayor Malcolm Brodie. And that basically he's raising the issue with property owners to say, hey, this is going to impact you. John Rustad wrote Premier Eby asking him to immediately pause all BC government negotiations with First Nations until the Supreme Court of Canada provides clarity on whether Aboriginal title supersedes private land ownership as part of the Cowichan ruling. There's a lot of discussion online that's been prompted by Brodie's letter. It's really ping-ponging around various social media feeds, a lot of conversation happening. Where do you think this is going, Geoff, politically?
Well, I was surprised at Brody's letter because he's a cautious person by nature, and he's really fanned the flames here of anxiety about private property, which I think is unwarranted. I don't think that there's no impact from the decision. Clearly, it needs to be clarified, but I don't think that First Nations have any interest in upsetting the economy of the province by undermining the role of private property. They've never, ever suggested they would do that. So if this court decision appears to do so, then everybody needs to sit down,
Well,
take a
uh,
deep breath, and work on it.
I just want to flag a quote though from the Globe and Mail from one of the Cowichan's negotiators, Robert Morales, who's been around for a long time. He's
Mhm.
very well-known treaty negotiator or negotiator, period. Um, he said in the Globe, the nations have always stated they're not interested in not wanting to displace the ordinary British Columbian from their land, understanding that's a pretty serious position to take. But there are corporate interests that are part of what we're disputing, corporations or the governments who have privately held land as a corporation or as a government. I think that's a different issue. That's the first time I've heard them say, draw a distinction on private land, but the Cowichan that is, draw a distinction between corporations and individuals. And, I think a lot of that land in the Cowichan area is like industrial land and, big box
Cowichan,
warehouses and things
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And I think that's where, okay. So what is on the table here for the Cowichan?
But this gets to a process question. So I don't
Yeah.
disagree that it's important that this all be clarified. I mean, I'm less anxious about it than a lot of people. But there's two ways it could go. And Rustad first said, why don't you do a referral to the Supreme Court? In other words, frame a specific question for a Supreme Court reference. And I think people, whether they're NDP or conservative or other political persuasion, could agree that's a legitimate approach. They may disagree that it's the right one in this case. In fact, the government does disagree and has decided to do the appeal instead. And I'm not sure whether that can be sustained indefinitely because the appeal, everybody also agrees, will take a lot longer. And, weeks and months of submissions and under a really sharp light, and then potentially years more waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court. I think Rustad's suggestion that somehow all negotiations with First Nations stop is ridiculous and destructive. But the question of whether or not it should be a reference or whether it should be an appeal is a reasonable question to ask. And I wonder if the Premier Eby may rethink his approach at some point and decide that the appeal can go forward, but maybe there should be a reference on specific questions that are more urgent. I don't know. We'll
Well, I
see
don't
how
think
it
it's
goes.
tenable either to say that there's no impact, there's no impact on private land at this point. This is between the Crown and the
No.
Cowichan as to how this gets sorted out because landholders they're not going to be able to get financing or they're not going to be able to, they're going to have trouble extending leases and things like that. Like there's going to be material change
Well, I think
until there's resolved.
I think the expansion of Indigenous rights and title discussions into urban areas is part of what we're experiencing here as well. I mean, when you're having a treaty settlement for the Niska First Nation, for example, which is way up in the north and territory has relatively few private interests on it, maybe leases and some private land. Then there's the Haida one. Again, the territory is very clear and distinct. But the Cowichan case is one where there was an overlap, and the territory that's of concern to the Cowichan is nestled within territory that's claimed, and everybody agrees is legitimately claimed by the Musqueam First Nation. So I think we're getting into the second stage of the discussions about Indigenous rights and title. I'm not as terrified as some people are about this, but maybe,
Yeah, we talked a bit about that last week with George Abbott too, in terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
overlapping being a tricky issue. But okay, more to come. Um, just wanted to flag an issue up in Kamloops, the resignation of the OB-GYNs up there. Kind of
Well, it's they put a question mark next to it today, apparently.
on the resignation.
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe they won't after all.
okay. So there were seven. They what's noteworthy is they kind of moved en masse and created a bit of a crisis situation about what's going to happen with maternal care in Kamloops. And on the one hand, uh, they are paid well by most people's standards. Maybe not as much
Well,
compared to OBGYNs in other places, but
north of $400,000 a year.
yeah. But their point is, I heard on the news this morning, was extreme burnout. So that's a different issue. I haven't heard that they're complaining about the money. I've heard that they're complaining about the
Well, I think
work
it's hard.
conditions.
Nobody likes to speak ill of doctors. Certainly,
Mm,
compared to lawyers, people willingly speak ill
mm,
of lawyers. But
yeah,
let me
we're
try.
happy. We'll do a whole episode on
Well,
lawyers.
if other workers had done what the doctors in Kamloops did, it would be called an illegal strike, and they'd be ordered back to work because they said we're so concerned about the care that our clients are getting that we're not going to deliver it anymore. Then the government said, we'll have to replace you then, and we'll have to offer maybe up to $500,000, which apparently has led to a change in thinking among the Kamloops people who say now maybe they were misunderstood and it's just out of concern for their patients that they made this threat. But I think it shows the kind of very difficult political territory that the government is in because uh, groups of doctors in other cases too have felt empowered to make these kinds of demands, and it's driving more and more costs. Like no one wants to see a doctor burn out, especially an obstetrician or anyone for that matter. But for them to say, well, we're all out of here over a period of time, we'll go in some orderly way, but we're all going to be gone, is well, in other areas it will be called a shakedown. And that's where I think we need to find some better way with the doctors of
Yeah.
BC to sort through this
But
stuff.
is it a shakedown though? I mean, I don't know enough about it, but you can't force people to work.
No, no.
So if they're very unhappy about their workload and what's they're not being heard by the health authority, then what other choice do they have?
Well,
Other than withdraw their work.
they can go to a different job, but they collectively withdrew their work, triggering a crisis in Kamloops and a panic, I'm sure, among young families and expecting kids in Kamloops, which they've now revised and are saying, well, actually, we won't go all at once. We'll go one by one, and maybe now that you've made some of these other announcements, we'll rethink the whole thing. I think it's very irresponsible behavior, and it wouldn't be tolerated in many other areas, especially in emergency services. I mean, if police said, well, we're all suffering from our job, therefore we're all going to just stop, outside the collective bargaining process. That's why we have arbitration for police forces so that we don't run into those difficulties. But I think, of course, obstetricians and, I've had the opportunity in our family to work with, meet some recently. You don't want to, you love the work they do. They're doing
Yeah.
critical work. You want them to be happy, but this is no way to solve the issue.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna probably get some listener feedback from Kamloops on this
Yeah,
one.
I don't, well, and from doctors,
Yes. Quick update on BCGU. Geoff, you've been following this one closely. I think Vince Reddy is on the job now, is he?
Well, that's right. So Ready, for those who uh, are new to the province, has been the go-to mediator and industrial relations solution man for, I don't know, 40 or 45 or 50 years. He's been very, very front and center in many, many key disputes. So when he comes into the room, and apparently the government proposed this and the BCGU agreed, he brings a ton of credibility, which is helpful to both sides to say to their stakeholders, here's how an objective
Mm.
person would understand the case. But I think we're still going to see this strike continue for a couple of weeks. I think the union will have to have another vote, which will be very interesting to see what they vote on, whether they recommend a settlement, and how the members view that. Because Paul Finch, the president of the BCGU, made it clear that there would be a vote on whatever the mediator had proposed. That makes sense to me. I think he has to do that, but he has a very, very high strike mandate. And to get straight to a settlement, we'll see whether the government has enough money to make the members feel good about that. It's not clear to me that the government's really suffering politically in a big way from this, nor is it clear to me that the GU membership, they really only did rotating strikes in key areas to hurt the government financially for the first number of weeks. So although it's been going on we're now in our 8th week, it's not clear to me how much the pressure has built up on either side. So I'm not prepared to predict for our listeners that this is going to be over by the end of the week or anything like that. I think it could last for a while yet.
Hey, Geoff, I think I hear a knock at the door. I think someone's trying to break into the strategy suite. Do you hear that?
Well, if you hear
Should
it,
we
I
open the
hear it.
door? Let's
Better
let's
open the door.
let's just check. Well, look who dropped into Strategy Suite. He's knocking on the door, breaking it down, wants to come in and talk to us. This mad, crazy bastard, Bob Kronbauer, BC Bob. Bob, what the hell are you up to?
I'm a door-to-door salesman is my new occupation, aside from telling stories about British Columbia to British Columbians.
Okay, so you've got this is your elevator pitch. You're cooking up something. It's a BC project, and we're all about BC here at Hotel Pacifico. So lay it on us. What are you up to?
If anybody knows my past work for the last 18 years, I've been talking about Vancouver and British Columbia, again, sharing stories about BC to British Columbians. I am trying to launch a Reader's Digest for British Columbia called BC Bob's Now You Know BC Almanac, not to be confused with Mark Forsyth on CBC's BC Almanac. It is the Now You Know BC actual almanac. And I'm launched a Kickstarter for this thing today.
Okay, for those who don't know Bob, if you've been living in a cave, Bob founded Vancouver is Awesome. He had the BC
Yeah.
is Awesome TV show, right? On TELUS TV
Sure.
for a while. And you're on TikTok and Instagram, and you're constantly putting stories out on a lot of BC topics too. Like
I
you,
also
All
have a
over the
show on
place.
Check now. I have a new
oh, yeah,
television
that's right.
called Now You Know BC, and so it's sort of
Oh,
an
cross
extension of that.
promotion.
It's
Wow.
it's not a Czech project, this project, but Now You Know BC is my tagline. That's how I end all of my short videos on social media. So I figured it was an easy choice to name this printed edition, which I hope to make quarterly. We'll see how this
Hmm.
campaign goes. I need to pre-sell a bunch of them, so that's why I'm here to sell you this,
Do you
Mike.
think
Specifically,
in your initial publication, your number one, volume one, number one, that there might be an article about Hotel Pacifico in there? Is that possible? Can we get in there?
Bob is
Hi,
speechless. I haven't
Bob.
seen that
Bob.
before.
Bob,
oh,
are you
so,
there?
yeah. Pardon
Bob,
me.
you there? Bob, did you
I was
freeze?
sorry.
Did you
I
freeze,
just got
Bob?
I just got a text from Glenn Clark, and I had to check it real quick, and so
Oh,
I was
don't put him
otherwise
in.
occupied
He's got
there.
too
Were
much
you saying
oxygen.
something?
Well, I think it would be great, Bob, if you brought to your new readership there, what a great podcast this is.
You know what you could do? You could buy an advertisement because there's
There
also
you go.
for
There you go.
advertisers. It's not a book. It's a look at this. That's the mention of Hotel Pacifico. There's actually a bidding war happening for the back cover right now.
I thought that's what we were doing right now, actually.
Yeah.
You
I
can
thought I thought you had suffered a spell for a minute there,
Thought we
Bob.
were
and
singing for our supper right now.
yes.
Bob
But
had suffered a spell there, but he's fully recovered.
Yes,
it's
I
good.
don't know. Glenn Clark says hello.
But Bob,
Okay.
this is not to look for what's the weather going to be when I'm planting my potatoes next summer. This is the people and stories of BC that I might never have thought of in a million years if I even had tried, right?
True story. Yes. So a lot of this stuff is stories I've already covered. Some of them are my go-tos, like the Caribou Camels story, where they brought camels up to the Caribou Gold Rush, and then more modern day stuff. All of the stuff that I find in my travels. I'm always traveling around British Columbia, and it's I'm calling it an almanac because it's not seasonal. It's not, hey, this is the spring edition. Here's what to do in spring in British Columbia. It's very much stories about the people and the places that have made this province what it is and continue to.
Okay,
You're going
Bob,
to
so
do
how
a
do
Ripple Rock story? You have to do a Ripple Rock story.
I will, yeah. We did a television episode on my show about that once where we went over the old Ripple Rock with
Hmm.
one of the former mayors, and there are actually two former mayors involved in that show. I guess there's been 100 different mayors of Campbell River, but one of them, do we have time for a quick story?
Or why not?
One of them chartered a bus. So if we're talking about door-to-door salesman, chartered a bus for people to go out to a empty lot and watch the Ripple Rock explosion, charged people $1 to go in until the RCMP finally sent them away and said they weren't allowed to send any more people in. But yeah, I'll do a story about
This
the
was
rock.
the explosion of the big reef outside of Campbell
Right.
River in like the 50s or something, right?
Right.
It was, yeah. You can read all about it in Bob's new almanac. Bob, how do people find out more about this project?
bcbob.ca if you want to take the easy route, or go to kickstarter.com and it's on there.
Good luck,
Okay,
Bob. Great.
Bob, thanks for coming by. We always appreciate you dropping into Hotel Pacifico.
Thank you. I just, Glenn said he was listening live and he said that he'll put in a good word for you to get mentioned in this. So I might mention
Oh,
you.
okay, that will help. That
Yeah.
will help.
I know. Always a good
Appreciate
word from
that.
Glenn Clark.
Listening live.
Always nice to have his name invoked on Hotel Pacifico.
Yes.
Okay, Geoff, off to the minibar. Do you have something this week?
I do. I'm raising a glass to Christine Boyle, Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, because of her decision to require a referendum by the City of Vancouver if council decides to get rid of the park board, which is an elected park board. This is an obscure, and maybe this is for BC Bob's Almanac, but the fact that we have an elected park board in Vancouver, which was something that got under the skin of Mayor Ken Sim, who said at one point before he was mayor that he would like to get rid of the park board and just merge it in with the city services otherwise there, just like most other cities, frankly. Then he changed his mind. He ran a full slate of people for park board. They all got elected. Then he changed his mind again and decided to get rid of the park board after all, which was a shock to the people who had run with him to serve on the park board. And this has become a really difficult, divisive argument in the city of Vancouver ever since, compounded by the fact that initially it appeared that Premier David Eby was completely fine with this and was prepared to let the city do it and make the amendments necessary to the Vancouver Charter. But it became more and more fraught, and over time, the government has decided this is a problem best left entirely to the city of Vancouver. And now a bill has been brought in that would allow it to happen, but only under extremely restrictive circumstances, which the mayor has said he doesn't like, and he wants further amendments to the legislation, which I think will wind up killing it all dead and will just continue with the current park board. So I've been sick of this argument for a long time, and I just want to raise a glass to Christine Boyle, the minister, who I think maybe took the obvious and clear-cut step necessary to put an end to the conversation for now. So we'll see what happens. It's only a year from the municipal elections, but there could be a referendum, I guess. Personally, I doubt it. And here's to Christine Boyle for what she did.
Yeah, I don't mind the odd referendum. It's
No. Well,
I think voters,
this would be a very odd referendum for sure.
I don't particularly want to go down the road of some of the, like California or other jurisdictions where everything's on a referendum, but the odd referendum on the odd issue doesn't makes us stronger probably and get people out to vote.
Well, if the mayor feels strongly enough, we'll have a referendum.
Yeah, there you go. I'd like to raise a glass to a former colleague, Sarah Elder, who toiled in the BC legislature some years ago, has since moved to Calgary and started the Madam Premier clothing line and other associated goods that she sells, and it's been, I think, quite successful in terms of the political community. Anyway, Sarah put her name on the ballot for Mayor of Calgary.
Wow.
And alas, she was not successful. But I just wanted to say, Sarah, good for you for putting your name on the ballot. And I don't think she ever entertained seriously the idea that she was going to be able to win because there was a lot of high-powered candidates in there. But just the process of running and having your voice heard is important. And I always, like you, Geoff, we're usually at least for a lot of time we've been in politics, we're usually in campaigns that are contending for power. But there's a role for people that are running who don't have a high percentage chance of winning, but are still there and heard and draw support from people who gravitate to their message. So, and you can't win if you don't run. So there you go. There's that too.
Well, it's a big election. I heard there was 350,000 ballots cast or something. Very big.
Yeah, it looks like a three-way race. The incumbent mayor of Calgary lost. She finished third. There's a new mayor, I think, Jeremy Farkas, maybe. Did I get that name wrong? Anyways, it was a barn burner apparently. But we'll be having municipal elections here next year, next October. Just this week was 1 year away from the next municipal election. So fair warning to Hotel Pacifico listeners, we will be amping up our local government coverage in 2026. Stay tuned for that. Municipal politicians, stay on your toes because we'll be watching.
You're here.
Well, that's a wrap. I'd like to thank YVR CEO Tamara Vrooman for joining us this week on Hotel Pacifico, and for BC Bob for his little cameo. And thanks to our sponsors for allowing us to bring this episode to you for free. See you next week. BC, you can never leave.